Hi, my name's Todd Stanfield, and I'm a professor in the School of Social Work. I'm also a former psychotherapist and was the director of a counseling center. But the main information I'm bringing to you today comes from experience in my own life, because this video is all about one technique that I have found to be very helpful for me to help overcome procrastination. You can download these slides you're going to see at this link, bit.ly, Pomodoro Go. It's at the end of the video as well. So when we talk about procrastination, it's part of the whole constellation of skills that we have called executive functions. And those three things that you primarily think of when you're trying to get things done, whether it be schoolwork or some other type of task that you're working on, is one, remembering the stuff you need to do, and also remembering it at the right time, sometimes at the right place or when you have the right materials or whatever the case may be, but just remembering the stuff you need to do. That's not what this presentation is about. There are other skills and tools that are helpful for that, and I may do some videos on that in the future. But this one is just going to focus on when you know what you need to do, but you're struggling to actually do it, okay? So challenge is this: you know what you want to do, but you can't seem to get started or stay focused. One way we term that sometimes is procrastination, which is just sort of a catch-all word for a lot of things when we're just putting things off. But the reason we put things off is very different for different people at different times. It's different for you at different times, depending on what the situation is. Well, let's just take a common situation students might encounter. You know you should be writing that paper. You got a paper due, you know you should be writing it. But instead of that, you remember you need to organize your sock drawer. Like anything to do something other than the thing you're dreading, right? And there can be a lot of reasons you're dreading to do something. You may find it boring. You might find it tedious. You may think, do it wrong or not be able to do it to your standards. And we'll actually get to those reasons for procrastination towards the end of this video. But for right now, I want to just focus on the one technique that you can do. And it works regardless of what your reason for procrastinating is. I do not say this lightly. This one technique did, in fact, change my life. It changes my life each time I use it, but it doesn't work magically, meaning I still have to do this technique in order for it to work. When I was first going to give this talk in person on campus, I was preparing the slides and talking to my wife about it, and I was like, I just really do not need to be the person going to do this, because I'm often not consistent in doing it, not sort of the role model someone should follow for getting this technique done. However, my wife reminded me, but when you do it, it works really well. And I was like, you're right. I'm like, but I'm still a mess. She said, yeah, you're much less of a mess this year than you were last year, and much less of a mess last year than you were the previous year. And she had a point. And I'm still a mess, but I'm much, much less of a mess. And the more that I use this technique, the more I'm consistent with it, the less of a mess I am. I really struggle sometimes to stay focused on the things I need to do. And a lot of us can identify with that. And you could identify that with that if you have ADD, but also for people just in general, particularly in the times that we live in, there's so many distractions around us, particularly technology. People are talking all the time about FOMO, F-O-M-O, fear of missing out. You're afraid that you're, missing something else that's going on. And so it's really easy to get caught up in other things other than the thing you want to be doing or that you need to be doing, right? So what is this technique? Here it is. It's the Pomodoro Technique. And the word Pomodoro is the Italian word for tomato, and the reason that was used for this technique is because the author, Francesco Cirillo, started this whole technique around a kitchen timer that was shaped like a tomato, like the one you see on the screen there. The basic idea is you're doing a timed period of work. To be more specific, the original Pomodoro Technique, like the sort of the core DNA of Pomodoro Technique, is this. You set a timer for 25 minutes and you focus on one task. So if you need to be working on the paper, you set a timer for 25 minutes and you focus on that one task. Now, in order to do that, you need to keep a notebook handy to record interruptions. Now, it might be something else, but I recommend actual paper and a pencil or pen so that you're not on your phone. You work for 25 minutes on that thing. For those 25 minutes are up and the timer rings, you have a 5-minute break. And that 5-minute break is yours. That's one Pomodoro, 25 minutes followed by a 5-minute break. But the original DNA of this looks like this. 25 minutes of work plus a 5-minute break, and then another 25 minutes and 5 minutes, and then 25 and 5 minutes. So 3 25-minute segments followed by 5 minutes, a 5-minute break. So an hour and a half, right? And then you get to past an hour and a half and you're going into that fourth 25-minute work period. But at the end of the fourth one, you're rewarded there by having a 15-minute break as opposed to a 5-minute break, okay? Now, we'll talk about modifications of this in a little bit, but this is sort of the core recommended technique that most people will use for Pomodoro. So, the whole idea is you're spending 25 minutes of focus on something, right? So, pick your timer. I mean, there's different things out there that, can work for you. I mentioned the mechanical timer, a stopwatch, your smartphone, your, watch, your laptop. However, we know that some of those can be a bit more distracting, like the phone, the computer. So again, you're going to be prone to have interruptions, right? So regardless of what your timer is, there's still going to be these internal or external interruptions. By internal, we mean those things that occur to you, like in your mind. They pop in your mind, the things you need to do. That you want to remember, or an external interruption, like you get the text from somebody. So you make a brief note of, getting back with that person or trying to get back to that thing you need to do, but just quickly refocus. So you might have the idea, oh yeah, I need to start some laundry, or my roommate wants me to watch a cat video, or I have this sudden urge to listen to Despacito, right? Or I've got to buy a pumpkin spice creamer, or respond to mom's text asking about laundry. Or search YouTube for avocado toast ideas, or check and see whether the paper is due tomorrow, which would be important information if you're working on the paper, right? But these are the example of external and internal interruptions you want to be able to write down while you're doing it. Now, the reason this is important is letting yourself know that you're not going to forget anything. And the truth is, sometimes the stuff on this list you're not going to forget anyway, or if you do forget it, it's not that big of a deal because it may not be that important. In other words, you can live without pumpkin spice creamer. But our mind tries to play tricks on us until it's got this like really important stuff you got to remember, and you start to get anxious about forgetting stuff when you're trying to do something else. And so you'll stop doing what you're doing and start doing that other thing, right? And the next thing you know, you've spent an hour looking at avocado toast ideas on YouTube. That's why it's important to write these down, because you're like, I can get to that later. I can do that later. But right now I'm doing this thing, right? Unless someone is in need of medical assistance or something's on fire, stick to the 25 minutes. Now, it might help in your work area or whatever, your dorm room or whatever, or however you could communicate this to people, maybe in a text, people that are going to text you a lot or whatever. You might want to say, hey, I'm doing a Pomodoro, and you can educate the people in your life about what that means. Please do not disturb for these 25 minutes. Now, that may sound rude. The people that care about you will understand that that's what it takes for you to get things done. Now, I say they'll understand this. There are some people that will not understand. And you can't control that, right? But what works for you. And if you find this works for you, you need to do it and help people understand. It's that this is the way I get work done. I mean, honestly, some of this is a new phenomenon, like this idea of being on all the time, 24/7, like we have mobile devices next to us. And also people think they can just, come up and start talking to us when we're working or whatever. And we don't want to be antisocial by any means, but at the same time, we have to communicate to people that we got work to get done, and this is how we do it, right? So, consider using a literal sign, or, texting some folks or whatever. Now in the phones, if somebody texts you and you're driving, you can have their do not disturb feature, or even a do not disturb button where you can just say back to them, driving now, can't talk, we'll respond later. Same thing could be true for Pomodoro. You could set up a little keyboard shortcut or whatever to do that, or you could just tell people ahead of time. Again, 25 minutes of focus. Pick your timer, whatever you want to use. Write down any internal or external interruptions. Make a brief note, then quickly refocus until the bell rings, and then you can stop and take your break. So, if you feel anxious about stopping at the end of 25 minutes, make a note of where to pick back up. For a lot of people, they get hyper-focused. In other words, once they get started, it's hard for them to stop. I'm one of those people. If I'm on a roll, I don't want to stop because I'm like, I'm getting so much done. And I'm afraid if I stop, I'm never going to start back up. And that is a challenge for me. But if I make a note where I'm going to start back, like I left off thinking about this thing, then, you can know where to pick back up. But that's because the 5-minute break is really important. And the reason it's important is, first of all, you need a break. Like your eyes need a break, particularly if you're staring at a screen or just like a book in front of you, the same focal length, meaning, just right in front of you or at the distance that your computer monitor is. And you need to be able to stare off something at a far distance just to give your eyes a break. But it also is part of why the technique works, because you get in the rhythm of work with a break and work with a break. And your mind is willing to go along with this. Okay, and this is more theory, hasn't been tested out in terms of neurochemical pathways that are occurring here, but your brain's playing a game. For most of us that struggle with procrastination, our brains tend to be dopamine starved. In other words, we're looking for something more exciting than writing the paper, right? And who isn't? But for some of it, it's more of a challenge than others. Your brain likes the game aspect. You're also telling yourself, look, all you're committing to right now is 25 minutes. You're not working longer than that, 25 minutes. And if you don't stop and take the 5-minute break, then you're in essence lying to yourself. And after a while, you start to not trust yourself to take the 5-minute break. So you really got to take the break. Like it's part of the cycle. That's part of the secret sauce, so to speak, of why this works. So it's your break. Do whatever you want to do and during that break. At least stand up, stretch, hydrate, drink some water, whatever, get some tea, coffee, whatever you need. Focus your eyes on the distance as I mentioned. And when that 5-minute break is up, stop that break, go back to 25. So again, you do that 3 times, 25-5, 25-5, 25-5. And then on that 4th time, you have 25-15. Okay. Now, again, picking your timer. There's pros and cons of each of those types. I've mentioned that just a little bit. There's different alarm sounds. Some can be disturbing when you're around other people, like different environments require different timers. It just varies. And I'm going to show you some examples, ones that are phone apps and things like that. Also, one that's portable, and obviously if it's on your phone or if it's a watch, it's very easy, but also a very small kitchen timer is easy to carry around too, like whatever works for you, okay? And also keep in mind, like don't, try not to use something that's going to be too distractible for you, but sometimes even when it is distractible, there's ways you can overcome that, and I'll talk about it in just a minute. Don't procrastinate by spending so much time trying to figure out which timer you should use. Don't overthink it. Just try the technique. So again, 25-5, 25-5, 25-5, 25-15. All right. So now you might be thinking right now, maybe like the first time I heard this thing, okay, this sounds stupid. All right. Somewhere my mother's upset that I've said the word stupid. I love games. This sounds great. I'm interested. Let's do this. Or this kind of is interesting. This intrigues me. Or, this might work. Or you might be like, judging everybody right now and saying, this is for weak people, right? Well, call me weak. I don't care. Whatever. Like it works for me. And yeah, I do have a procrastination weakness, struggle with that, like trying to stay focused on things. And for me, that's, something that I struggle with for a lot of different reasons. But if something works, it doesn't really matter why it works. And honestly, it doesn't matter what people think about it, as long as you're not hurting people, right? Like you're doing you, go for it, right? And this is all around the idea of neurodiversity. The idea that our brains all work different, like we problem solve different. We think about things different. We're used to like that whole idea of visual learners, auditory learners, and that's true. But that's just a scratching the surface of the diversity we have in terms of how we cognitively process things. Some of us look at things very differently or require different types of setups in order to get things done. In other words, we can all arrive at the same outcome, but we might take a different path getting there. And that path may be the only path that works for us. But as long as it gets you to that destination, do it. One of the sayings in the recovery community is it works if you work it. Meaning the program works if you work it, right? Same for the Pomodoro Technique. Like it works if you work it. And I mentioned earlier, why does this work? Well, this whole idea of a gamification, like you're playing a game here, so to speak. It also plays into Neil Fiore's guilt-free play principle. One of the best books out there on procrastination is a book called The Now Habit by Neil Fiore, who's a psychologist. His key principle within the book, The Now Habit, about how to overcome procrastination is to not neglect planning, actually scheduling and putting on your calendar guilt-free play, meaning things you enjoy doing or things that you're doing that doesn't count as work, but that are somehow truly recreational, right? Like that they're recreating you. And sometimes that might just be vegging out and watching Netflix, or it might be doing yoga, or it might be playing a video game, or it might be, spending time with friends. It might be taking time to cook a meal, whatever you count as play in your mind, right? Doing some creative work like that you don't normally get to do, or because you're so busy doing the required work, you don't get to spend much time being creative. And his idea is this, that you actually try to schedule this guilt-free play. And if you do that, your brain knows it's scheduled. And so then it doesn't feel like I'm never going to have any time for fun, because you know that you've scheduled that. And he actually goes a step further and says, don't write down planned work times on your calendar. You can write down, obviously, class times. You got to go to class. Also, when you have appointments, those kinds of things. But if it's just like, I'm going to work on my paper today, well, make sure you put on your calendar like the things you want to do for fun that day, and only write on your calendar when you've worked on your paper after you've actually worked on it. In other words, you could write down each one of these Pomodoros. I'll show you what that might look like in a second. That's not part of the pure Pomodoro technique, but it's part of the reason it works is because your brain is like, you know what, I'm going to get a break. In 25 minutes, I get a break. And you'll learn to savor those 5-minute breaks, right? Particularly like just honestly just standing up and stretching and looking off in the distance and getting some water and those kind of things. So you're just not, sitting in one position. At the end of the day, you can count how many Pomodori you have completed. That's the plural of Pomodoro, right? How many of these have you completed? And you can track your success over time to see if you get better or whatever. And as I said, being consistent with it is something that you'll have to work at, right? And you'll have to give yourself some grace to get better and better. So again, as I said, you may feel like, gosh, I'm still a mess, but you'll be much less of a mess, right? In other words, you'll be much less likely to procrastinate because you have a method you can use, but you still have to use it, right? You can't avoid using it. You still have to use it. So in other words, you could, there's definitely the possibility, and I certainly have done it, of procrastinating on not using the Pomodoro technique. In other words, you can't procrastinate on that. Like, try it. Just try it. Tell yourself, I'm going to work for 25 minutes, right? And, even if you get 10% better, that's still better. Slow progress is still progress. And as I said, I'm the chief procrastinator, so that's why I'm telling you about this. It really has changed my life. But again, I would say it changes my life moment by moment as I use it. If I don't use it, it's not life-changing for that day. Does that make sense? But I know what I can do. And again, it works if you work it. So quick story, my daughter, who is homeschooled in 9th grade, her mom and I both work. And so, she has a lot of time that requires a lot of self-monitoring and motivation. And she struggles with being, easily distracted. And so part of what she and I did, we tried a few different timers. Like, she loves plants. The app she has used is something called the Forest app. It's on both the Apple App Store and also on the Google Play Store for Android. Now, the thing about this is again, I mentioned that sometimes your timer might be distracting. So you can basically, have a timer that might make it more likely that you're actually going to use your phone because the timer's on the phone. Well, this one's actually, that's what this one's all about, is keeping you off your phone while you work. So what you do is you set a timer for 25 minutes. And there's a shorter one for 10 minutes, which is a bush instead of a tree. But this one's a tree, right? And so whenever you want to focus, you plant a tree, and the tree will start growing, okay? But if you leave that app, okay, now you can quickly flip over to a text or something, come right back. But if you're gone for more than a couple seconds from that app, it kills your tree. Your tree will die. Okay. Now, at the end of the day, you can look at the forest you've built. You can look at how many trees you've planted and grown that day. Okay. And recently I told a student about this in one of my classes, and they came back after the weekend and said, Dr. Stanfield, I grew 12 trees this weekend. And I was pretty surprised and impressed. They really enjoyed it and got into it. And they didn't use this one, but they used another free one that was out there. But my daughter loves this one. So, around my house, we talk about, how many trees that you did today, right? So my daughter will text my wife or I and say, I'm starting a new tree. And so it lets us know that she's going to be working for the next 25 minutes. And she'll also text us when she started to break. And she also, on her phone, one of the keys that have worked for her, she's puts distinct ringtones and text tones for, people that she wants to know are texting her immediately, or that are calling her, like people like her mom and dad or grandparents or close friends or whatever, who know that they'll be calling only when there's something that they really need to, talk about. That way she can put the phone across the room or face down while the timer's running, right, or whatever, and just know that if there's notifications going off, unless it's a certain ringtone or certain text tone, that it's not anything important. She can ignore it and know that nothing bad is going to happen in those 25 minutes. She's not going to miss anything, right? Instagram notifications are a big temptation for her. But the nice thing about the Forest app, again, is that it will kill your tree. That's the nice thing. It'll kill your tree if you start messing with your phone, right? So it keeps you off of that. But also, besides just going back to the phone, also just those notifications can distract you cognitively. So you want to try to, limit those distractions as much as possible. One of the key things about trying to battle procrastination is to decrease the stimuli, decrease the unwanted stimuli and increase the wanted stimuli. In other words, make it easier to do the things you want to do, make it harder to do the things you don't want to do, right? By turning them down literally sometimes, right? So that they're less attention getting, basically. So again, as I mentioned, these are called Pomodoro, like individual periods of it. There was a time before we got to the Forest app that she found that she really liked, that we called them avocados because she's a fan of avocados. So what we did is we actually had these green stickers that we would, like if she completed them, we'd put them on her paper calendar. So again, she didn't write down, I'm going to work. She put dots down every time she did a avocado or a Pomodoro, right? So as I said earlier, there's lots of apps out there. There's some for iOS and Android. There's Apple Watch, Android Wear. Just search for Pomodoro on those app stores or Play stores. Again, don't obsess on finding the perfect one. Find one that works for you for that day. Like just, find one that looks the best for that day. Try it. See if you like it. If you don't like it, try it later, right? Or use one for a whole week and decide, I'm not looking for a new one until Saturday or until I've got some downtime or whatever, because you can spend a whole day, and more like saying, I've got to find the perfect timer. That's the definition of procrastination. So find one and run with it. And, if you need to, set a timer for looking for one. Like, okay, I'm going to spend 25 minutes looking for a timer. And after that, I'm going to go with whichever one looks best. Now, many will let you do other times other than 25.5. I mentioned that the Forest app will let you do a 10-minute bush instead of a 25-minute tree. Some start at 5 minutes, and I call this a wild 5, but you can do that yourself. You can set your time to whatever you want to, because sometimes you're just not feeling the 25 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't even think about working on this paper for 25 minutes. Now, you have to eventually to get it done, but you're just not feeling it. And so I call this the wild 5. You can set 5-minute timer and just get started. There's actually apps for that. I think one of those is called Rise Up. 5 minutes sometimes is all you can do. So maybe you take 5 minutes of work and a couple minute break, or even 5 minutes of work and 5-minute break, whatever. Because we know that we can tolerate 5 minutes of work. We'll be okay, right? Now, some people sort of take it in the opposite direction. So some people don't do 25.5 and 25.5. They do a 42.18. So 42 minutes of work and then 18 minutes of rest. So there's a lot of different options out there. So here's another one that was similar with the whole tree idea. This one is called Flora. So it's very similar. It looks like it's free. There's some in-app purchases, but it's free. So it's very similar to that. So the first one was Forest. This one's Flora. Here's another one if you're more into creatures, mythical creatures. It's one hatched, and so you get an egg, and your egg will hatch if you do your work. If not, I assume your egg dies. That's morbid, but I'm not sure how that actually works. I haven't looked into the specifics of that one, but you can see it's popular. People like it, and apparently works for folks. Ones that are a little bit more or less around a theme and are just like straight up timers that keep statistics. Focus Keeper Free. Be Focused. Focus Timer is a good one. There's one called Flat Tomato. Again, Pomodoro's Italian word for tomato. So this is the Flat Tomato. And then the Focus app. And so a lot of these are like available on your phone plus your computer, or some just on your phone or just your computer, or some are available on your phone and your app, your iOS watch, your Apple Watch, or your Android Wear watch. Some are available on Macs only, and some on Windows, whatever, right? There's various combinations of those out there. There's also some great paper planners out there. Now, you could simply just use a notebook, right? Blank notebook and do it. There's a great paper planner called the Productivity Planner, Daily Planner, that is available on Amazon. And it has there, as you can see, it's actually got 5 tasks that you're going to do in a day. And those little circles out to the right actually represent Pomodoro or trees or avocados or whatever you want to call them. So those are 25 minutes of work. Here's another one called the Mastery Journal that's very similar. You can see there's different sessions there. But again, this one's using like a 42-18 approach, although you could be anything. So this is really only like 4 sessions, and you need them to be longer than that. But I'm just saying that there's, different options out there for doing it on paper. Another timer I like is actually a website called Focus at Will, and you can set a timer there for whatever you want to. And there's paid accounts and also free ones. The free ones I think are basic classical music, and then there's ones that are other things. But I can get sucked into trying to build a study playlist or finding a good one on Spotify, and 2 minutes later I hadn't started working on stuff. The nice thing about Focus at Will, it's already got the music curated for you, so it's going to play stuff for 25 minutes, and then the music will automatically stop at 25 minutes. So you almost can just sit there, do your work, and when the music stops, that your break is now started because your work session's over. As I said, Spotify has some nice playlists, but don't play with that while you're supposed to be working. Do that at another time. I've got some of my own playlists that are either instrumental music or not English lyrics because, but it also can't be instrumental music to songs I know the words to, or the words pop in my head anyway. So it has to be things where I can't think of lyrics or hear lyrics when same thing, white noise apps, and there's, YouTube channels out there related to things. You're probably familiar with a lot of those. There's actually some Pomodoro timers out there. Those first two are basically 25 minutes. And as a person really basically saying, okay, work with me. And they start a 25-minute timer, and there they are working. And, you might have library background sounds or whatever. So whatever works for you. Some other things this is actually this one actually runs 35 minutes, but it's not so much a timer as it is a guided meditation for beating procrastination. And it actually is, I like it. I can listen to this one even though it has words that I understand, because I find it calming. And this is actually in app form, but you can download this as an MP3 or whatever. But I really like this one. It's kind of a meditation / borderline hypnotism kind of thing. But I really like to listen to it when I'm working on things. So even if I'm doing a 25-minute Pomodoro, I'll still start this and listen to it in the background sometime. So what if you still can't get started and you're not sure why that is? Well, you can actually try some CBT-related apps. And by CBT, I mean cognitive behavioral therapy, meaning you're changing your behavior by changing the way you think about things. Neil Fiore, again, the guy who wrote The Now Habit, says that procrastinators talk this kind of way to themselves. They say, I have to finish and do it big and perfectly and suffer while doing it. Okay. Producers say, I choose to start small, humanly, with enough time for guilt-free plays. Basically, talking to yourself differently. Precrastinators are not PRO procrastination, but Procrastinator.com. Also an app called Arise. I mentioned Arise earlier, actually. It's like a 5-minute timer. It can be on starting out on things. But what's cool about it, you can also do this at the website, is you can, tell it why you're not doing something. And they actually call it, okay, here's the Non Procrastinator Demon. And by demons, they mean 9 sort of common ways we tend to think about tasks that would cause us to procrastinate. So for example, one's called the Intimidator. And the Intimidator basically says is something that you're afraid of, right? This task would put you outside your comfort zone, and it scares the crap out of you, and you plan, you're plain and simple, you go into fight or flight, right? And so you're just trying to stay away from it. Now, there's many other types out there, but I'm telling you, this Procrastinator.com or the Arise app, which are both the same folk, is great. It's amazing. Another one that's related to that is something called Procrastor, which is also sort of CBT, and that gives you these 5 basic options. So you are either saying, my task is too big, I don't know where to start, I've made a mistake, I have to finish, I have to be perfect. Whatever you're telling yourself, you select that one, and it will actually, talk back to you, give you the alternative way to think about that. So instead of having the cognitive distortions that we talk about in CBT, you're more realistic and sort of talk yourself out of that irrational reasoning that has caused you to procrastinate. So sometimes we make things bigger than they should be, right? And so this helps you put them in their proper perspective. So again, Pomodoro Technique. Wind up a 25-minute timer, focus on one task for 25 minutes, keep something handy to quickly jot down your interruptions, internal and external. Try to minimize the interruptions, do not disturb signs. Try to keep the interruptions short. When the timer stops, when the timer rings, stop, right? Make a note of where you need to pick up if you need to. If you're getting nervous about, forgetting where you left off, make a note of that. Set a timer for 5-minute break. Get up, stretch, get some water, whatever you want to do. Rest your eyes, check your Instagram, whatever you need to do. And then when the 5 minutes is up, wind up 25 again, right? And you're going to repeat that 3 times. So I would love for you to try this. I'm actually I'm doing some research on my campus about this, and I know other people than students on our campus will see this video in the future, or at least I hope they will. But try this, because it may be that somebody asks you at some point, like whether this has actually worked for you. There's a lot of anecdotal information out there, like me telling you it works for me. That's anecdotal, meaning it's not a big research study. But there's really not that many published studies, particularly as it relates to students, right? And even just general people doing work. It's been used a lot in software development and things like that, but more as time boxing and not so much as Pomodoro Technique. But I promise you, there's a lot of people that are sort of cult followers of the Pomodoro Technique, because I run into people all the time that have heard of it and use it and love it. And some people are actually ashamed to talk about it, because again, some people judge you for using it because they think it's so weird. But again, if it works, it works. Part of the link that I'm going to show you at the end, that I showed you at the beginning, where you can get this information, there's also this one-page cheat sheet for the Pomodoro Technique, and it gets into some of the other things. It's actually one that's put out by Francesco Cirillo, so I've got the PDF linked on that page. I'll give you that URL here in just a second again. Big 3 books for me, like if you want to go deeper on this, obviously the Pomodoro Technique. There's also another Pomodoro book called the Pomodoro Technique Illustrated, which I actually like a little better than the original. I'm sorry I don't have it for you here. I'll try to link it on the page. But there's another Pomodoro book out there, and if you search Amazon, you'll see it. It's called the Pomodoro Technique Illustrated. I really like it. It's kind of funny. The way it's written. The Now Habit, again, great book on procrastination, and how to focus on guilt-free play and scheduling. But another, if you are struggling for those first things that I talked about, like knowing when to do something, what you need to do, when you need to do it, at the place you need to do it, with the resources you need to do it with. Getting Things Done is a great book for reading about that. But, I would challenge you just to start with the Pomodoro Technique right now, just trying to focus on getting tasks done that you need to work on. For me, it has worked. Now, it doesn't mean it won't work, that it's going to work for you, but I really believe it would work for the majority of people, and I hope that that's actually true for you. And I would just say, give it a chance. If it's not working because you're not doing it, it's not the technique that's not working. It's that you're not trying it. So try it and see if it works for you, and if you see if it's effective or not. So again, if you have questions about this, you can email me at this email address. There is the link again, bit.ly/PomodoroGo. So let me know if you have questions. You can put those down in the comments area as well. I hope you find this useful. Go download the slides, check out the other resources, and just I'd love to hear whether or not this works for you. All right, thanks for listening.